Alright, that is going to Denjogi Milurimboche top, Dene, and Chichibu, Yubi, Yoba Delia, and Jugi, Sim Bayu Matembache, Bamigo, one to Danche, Dene, Yomo, Simti, Yomo, Shawato, so Yomo, Shawato, Serbi, Wangi, Lunga, Juba, and Diva Megawa Silent Pier, Side, Dene, Dela Dene, Milu top to Mareki, Chimada, and Son Mato. And the millet of 2 mares, Santini, is a milumato by na, Yawachimanam Suine, and Masumela, and the Dipa, Dipane, Mambusa to go, and the Kawasa de Kalakawa Chagore, the name said in the Mudishima, Mazuki, Kiwi, Jawa, and the Casore, Naso Dushine, Teza, the Jimilu, Totumar, Dimatumna, and Della Yaminji, Cobra Mares, Dushine, Shia, and Dinashin down Zuki. That Gaza, that thing around the Chichi ranking when you twin Chasa Sound, and Chi twin Nangi, twin Chasa Sound, you get like Majebaina, and the Moban and Asol Gavana, and also doing your head, and so Dindela, and the Lantoriki Netiki, and the Papangja, the Yams language, Lantori Netiki, Shingas, Gavati, Haku Maris, she's a Mong, the Nigga Mong, but the Nick of Lead, the Kakushi, Mares, Chia, Mares, the names are. To get Dendelia that go of Udic of Lancer, Bezugine, and Dipon Kirche or Reset, that sing out the Neshi Rod at Dordur of Shivena.
Good evening. So last week we looked at how, all having achieved a precious human rebirth, we now have the opportunity to cultivate the Dharma within. And we should strive to do so relying on conscientiousness, for if we do not rely on conscientiousness, the afflictions will continue to dominate, and we will end up accumulating extensive non-virtue, which may well lead to us falling in the lower realms in our next rebirth. And should one fall into the lower realms, there it is exceedingly difficult to accumulate virtue, whereas non-virtue is easy to accumulate. So now, whilst we have the opportunity, we should embrace the opportunity to cultivate virtue, to cultivate the Dharma within. The problem that a being in the lower realm encounters is that they are dominated by deep, confused ignorance, whereby they cannot come to understand what it is to be, what virtuous minds are and how to adopt them, nor what are the non-virtuous minds and how to abandon them. So not having the intelligence to understand this, hence they continue to, with such ease, accumulate extensive non-virtue.
And in it, the shit and Naruch. The Gawa Daja, Majella, Diva Daja, Yersane, Gawan Jor, and Jariani. And
continuing on a similar theme, we come to the 19th verse in the 4th chapter. If I do not engage in extensive virtue, but accumulate a mass of negativities, thereafter for 10 million eons, I will not even hear the words higher realm.
Tati negapla, Nanzuki, Tenju, Rimboche top, that's so soon when that one but Sawa, and the Chigi, and Chu, Sadikieva, and the Chigi at Chasan Sanduba, Susun when it sang, but it Chi when you're quite young Chu Yode, but the Chu Yamlenchiga Yuba, Chu thinking Lama Yuba, the Negata, Ranjuranga, Shanju, Chanjunga, Sandubi, and then you lead into UBT Kabla, down to Angelia. Dipon Kiru Bezu, Chechin Yaman Cheku Wars. She's not in a Majebachem, and Gawata Yamatin Cheku Ward, the new Kob Yudi Kabliach, Majebache, and the same Bame Watang, same Bame Tadu, then the same Bayu Matimbache, Bame Watang. Bameta the same Yomo Shon. Yomo Bichon Son you do. The new Lunga Vichevatia and Shala Nebata, and Divi Latio. The Jay do another, yeah, she's not. Gawachigo, she's the same Bame, Bayu Matin Bache, same Bame Diana, in the same Bame on the Dangan Diruada, Setism, to get that Jik Jawa and Alea teacher to 이게 감염 drogo도 당은 직분자 투고도 drogo 투고도 세다 되는 디멘비가 지 되니기 셈 남이야 차제 레르 원도 소지네 직디네 개와사고 말와제다 지사다 니제든 비글응아 이스 니제든 수름 숨고 말에 아니디 숨고 말 디멘베 아니지 지사 니침바다 쇠바다 전주게 냠네디 지교 말와서 진짜 개와다야 마지야 바세 마지야 라서 디시올다
Looking at the first line, if I do not engage in extensive virtue. So this refers to if one does not make the most of this remarkable opportunity that we've all achieved, this precious human rebirth marked by the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments, which mean we have the opportunity now, having met a spiritual teacher, having faith in the teachings, and having the physical and mental capacity to be able to engage in the teachings, cultivate them within. But if we do not utilize this remarkable opportunity, but allow non-conscientiousness to dominate, in other words, without the inner guardrails to protect our mind from the afflictions will continue to be our normal way of being. And thereby, we will accumulate non-virtue with ease. And this also includes following the afflictions of distraction, to be precise, the laziness of distraction, where we are distracted by mundane worldly activities. We may be very busy doing many things, but these have no real value. And in this way, we waste our life. We waste this opportunity. Rather, what we should be engaging in is cultivating ethical restraint, generosity, patience, joyous perseverance.
데네에서 당은 저기 체델리아 도시네 바히메 템바제 데니기 진 개화마 주바이나 제사다 개화치마 문료 고방 토예의 규디 사교 말바다 제산 문료 고방 토예 규디 다 니제든 베츠름 소야다 저거 고미야 안지메 냠네 자 전주 냠네 디스고 호르바 제산 문디 정원dio 고방 토예의 개화림 변규 수팀 마송와제 마송와서 문료 고방 토예 규 마주바래 데니게 마음반에 땐라 아니 디기용하게 주 튕긴 차야 주 진바이 냠네 마제바 데네 원보 상황라서 쇠변년에 마제바 쉐냠네 제기 아니 듬바게 전주이 냠네 마제바 데니게 두스 마제바에서 개와치마 원료 고방 토야 규대야 사고 말에 아니 지게 개와치마 땐델야 디기용하게 규야 사고 말 와서 그렇다 지마사바자다 된 마사바 세델야 데니게다 마사야도 세델야 류안이 좀 수름다 진바서만 잠니지 고미하게 야 요마 지고 말로 지나다 세델야 되네게 약게와 냠는 제마도 되네 제마도 어서 개와 치마 문료 고바 토야다 덴델야 한 chuyện 제 귀야 마사와 자고 말해서 나디 송거다 지상가 문료 고바 토야게 대한 유단 긴지를 되네 토고마도 문료 고바 세디 유단 긴매발 기고 말로 지상 유디 다데디 싸고 그래서 지상 문료 고바 토야 덴델야 최유지 튕긴 차상 차와 원벌라 소바 차와 안지기 소수기 루시 시지대 덴바다 데네 chuyện 제 되냐 듬바 여바 디하디게 안 유단 견레 데네 용고 시자 유단 견데 다든 가서 싸고디 데네 마사바에는 안 개바치마 용도 말와스 시자 디네자 개바다자 마제바 생각도 세텔리아도 마제바이나 디고 말해서 왔다.
If we fail to accumulate virtue, when our death comes, we will lack the required causes that will ensure a further excellent rebirth, to ensure that it would ensure a rebirth like the one we have right now. If we do not accumulate virtue, it means we will not be striving in ethics, which is the primary cause to attain rebirth in the higher realms. Moreover, we will create not sufficiently strong causes of generosity to ensure that we have material abundance. Nor will we be patient and thereby not creating the causes that will ensure our sense faculties will be complete and we will easily have harmonious relationships with others. Nor will we be cultivating joyous perseverance, a mind that delights in virtue. So without these causes being accumulated, we will not experience the desired result, the result of a rebirth similar to what we have now. And therefore, we will not be able to, not fully embarking on the journey of spiritual development in this life, we certainly will not be able to in future lives. Therefore, in future lives, any hope we have of cultivating love, compassion, and bodhicitta will not come about, because we have not created the causes that ensures further excellent rebirths. Here we bear in mind the process of dependent arising, or cause and effect, that if there's a particular goal that we want to achieve, we will only attain it by accumulating those causes. A mere aspiration or hope, no matter how heartfelt, is insufficient. We have to transform or develop that hope into the activity that is the accumulation of causes. All that we have now in this life, born as a human with good intelligence and having met the Dharma and interest in the Dharma and having all that required to cultivate the Dharma within, all of this has come about in dependence on causes. Therefore, recognizing this, we should strive to continue to accumulate such causes.
Jazada divas dane nyasane situ karsoros nangantu da cedelia sem bayu maten baje sem bame tanju ben bayu ten situ sem di ba yu chola sampa chwa da bame bayu maten bade sem bame tanju sem di de cha khoro nyomo be shangwa do so nyama so de da de ji shu ba na je ani ji sem khoro nyomo be shangwa so de ani ji lunga jo ba ti la shan le ne bi ke jo ba shi li go ba jazan di Lu Kone Diba Sada, Nago Diba Sai, Kone Diba Sadi, the Jazan Lunga Yisum Kone Diba, the Saigo Regevada. The Diba Sago Bazan, that Diba Sabana, Nason Yudi Dibal in the Gigor, which is a Nasun Yudi, Yuda Kimela, Yungo, Yuda Latin, Yungo, Yuki, and the Benanson Kiedi, and the Chig, she had Semchen Social Chapa, Shanky Sudum, Mason Genjine, and the Digi Sudum Lobat Kion, the Langason Gusa. 안지야 지금 류마게 샹리에 채워다 녀바제도 능아선 깨야 능아선 땡들이야 누가야기 유디 마사 자고로 왔어. 제가 유차산 사고 디바다 녀산 주스 나선 깨기 유다 나선 깨네 나선 땡들 누가야 유차산 사고로 왔어. 사바인자 다 안에 와치마 시도나 가오던 나선 깨도 그랬어. 제가 나선 깨로 봤나 나선이야 누가 용거야 직제 아니 나선 땡들이야 안지 대시 가사 녀마 슈반다진 개도 개와 디고 랑도르게 네 마시바 몽바 안데 장 개비 자오 주베라고 말해 와서 그러다 되네 자다 제사 디바다 녀사네스 사다세.
The second line, but accumulate a mass of negativities. So this will result if one is not conscientious, because conscientiousness is a mind that is turned towards virtue. So when one is not conscientious, then the afflictions dominate. And when the afflictions dominate, one engages in small but also strong non-virtue. In particular, one engages in activities which may bring harm to others. And from non-virtue, only suffering can result. And should non-virtuous imprint ripen as a propelling karma at the time of our death, only rebirth in the lower realms can follow. So all unwanted circumstances that we have ever experienced or that we've ever observed has come about in dependence on the creation of non-virtue, of taking the lives of others, harming others, and so forth. All suffering comes about in this way. Adding to this recognition, what was we looked at last week, how when one falls into the lower realms, the great despair of being in such a situation is not just that this being is suffering intensely, but this being is helpless. Helpless because of the strength of their confused ignorance, of their lack of capacity to know what kind of behavior is non-virtue non-virtuous and therefore should be abandoned, what kind of behavior is virtuous and therefore should be engaged in. This, being in the lower realms, lacks the capacity to come to understand. Hence they are helpless. They are helpless because they struggle to accumulate even weak virtue, but accumulate non-virtue so easily. So thinking in these ways, one develops a determination to rely on conscientiousness, not to engage in non-virtue.
Kawan jewa yarya ni si de jisa denegi da ngason ge tendela ngason kewa langso bana ngason tendela dunga nyong ba che ani ngason tendela kewas jegi ko ga tinyi chane ko ga me samde thone kewa ji machine de da dibu je de ne yor wa so da dibu je de ko khora sa yore shen le chawa chi ya yore ne bi jisa dibu ne sa go wa dibu sa wa da han ngason ge gyudi sa go re tendel ge gyudi ngason tela sa go ma sa tu go ma jisa dibu 제가 상상하기 양양상의 유니스 야고 망고사고 봐서 사완장 양앙서 깨와요. 나도 두시는 가서 깨와래 대양 된들랑 가서 깨와래 교사 대양 가서 두시는 게 가원 빼빠도 매봐 제가 잘라서 봐 두시 야네 야도 야는 가서 두시 깨네 깨지 코라 거르지네 두시니 나서래 탈마도지 나서 자냐 깨와래지 두시는 요 고샤고래 해지려.
Third line, thereafter for 10 million eons. So this then references once one falls into the lower realms, one struggles to accumulate even slight virtue. One is predominantly, almost exclusively accumulating non-virtue. Why? Because this is the propensity that one took birth in that realm with, taking rebirth there from a non-virtuous cause. One has this inclination. Moreover, one lacks knowledge to what should abandon and what to engage in. And then thirdly, one is suffering so intensely that one's self-cherishing dominates. Thereby one continues to accumulate ongoing causes for rebirth, repeated rebirth in the lower realms. So an expression such as 10 million eons, what this specifically refers to is that once a being has fallen to the lower realms, because they continue to create non-virtue, rebirth after rebirth, and for uncountable rebirths, will remain there in the lower realms.
가서 된적이 영원도 고방 토열도 갈래하고 지울 차고 되는 마선 때 영원도 고방 해야지 그 암초를 다 펴봐서 양 갈래하고 버려 되고 말해 되고 말해서다 되게 다 자자면 되고 말해 되려 자야 또 된적이 토열라도 개월내야 파수시에 된적 해야지 암초랑 고야 그러나 다 갈래하고 쉬우래서 되려 자야 또 되면서.
The 19th verse concludes with, I will not hear even the words higher realm. So this references that having been born in the lower realms and continuing to accumulate non-virtue, it's so difficult to once again take rebirth in the high realms. It's almost as if it could be said that it's not possible to take rebirth in the high realms. This is because for uncountable future lifetimes, one will remain in the lower realms because of how difficult it is to create causes for rebirth in the higher realms. Then this is presented in a more poetic way. If one were able to hear a word high realm, it would be so unlikely that one would hear it that one will not even hear such a word.
나는 주는 dordyushweina 당아즈야 안지게 안제 된주에 안제 미류된 톱데 내가 고급 여배네 안주게 안지게 체텔이야 지 용아 예수님 예주님 출연소야다 진바다 소발로 소바데네기 게위 냠는다 잠니젤로 소바데네기 냠는 맞아봐이나 안게 와치면 원dio 고판 규사고 말해서 원dio 고판 톱 된델레 디기루에 규사고 말해 인자이다 원dio 고판 톱하고래 톱 두고 말해 안 토마토에서 원디 텔레 디기하디야 용 말해 세상 원도 마토바네 개와 침만 없어요. 랑기 류딘디 원도 마토바네 시행리에 팬버주비게 아니 잠니지 고미하다 시행리 로제게 대한님네 지도 말했어. 대사지 지도 말했어. 나한테 세델이야 셈 밤에 바위에 맞으면 밤에 원도진 디빌레가 요모 원도서 디빌레가 책이나 ngāsōng gyūsā kōrē, dī ngāsōng gyū kōrē. ngāsōng bāyā lā yā ngāsōng tēlā ngāsōng gyū bāk mē bā sāchīn, dī ngāsōng yā thār yā dī kālē khābu shū rē sō dā, jizā dā ngāsōng thār jī ngōndyō kōmā tōsē bē kālē khābu chā kī rē sō, bēnē kāwā gyā, jihwa gyā lō sō bā dūs nē shīn dūngā nyō yā dāng, dī dēndrō sā dī kīyā dī gyūn rī bō dēndrō rē, dēndrō kī dēndrō sā dī dhāsā miyā kō tū mā rē sē, dēndrō kālē khābu yō rē sā, dūs shīn dī sōng kō rō dā.
The meaning in brief of the 19th verse is that if we do not embrace this opportunity that we have achieved, this opportunity to accumulate virtue and strengthen our habituation to the Dharma, then by not being conscientious, we will accumulate non-virtue. And through this accumulation of non-virtue, we will fall into the lower realms. And once there, it is so difficult to accumulate even weak virtue that our situation becomes hopeless. So this is important to recognize because we may well be under the delusion of thinking later or in future lives I'll accumulate great qualities such as love, compassion, and bodhicitta. But if one doesn't create the causes right now that will ensure good rebirths, if we fall into the lower realms, it's not just that we'll continue to circle in cyclic existence, it's as if we'll be solely circling in the lower realms. We won't even be able to hear of another possibility. We won't even be able to hear the words higher realms.
Deniki sem bayu matembeche bame ondo tawaina ne kewa sagyo ma tsurim sungu minwa ane jimba tangi minwa so deni nyal maje bana den kewa chima dendriki tu minwa sameke dushin gyumsen samta da jizan dendriki kewa gyuti su sago gyuti su ma sabana dendriki tenla ane jigi nyamlen digi nyoya dang ane shalya pemba tutoya di yungu minwa sameke samta 다제 엔텐델이야 셈 바웨마 덴바치 지선 셈 바메 온도진 땅을 두 바메 온도 제반 셈데 되샤 컨트롤 녀마다 제만 손데 된 제율링아 제바데 디바 바마 사용 거래 데니 디바 사바네 데니 유디디 사용도 아는 안솔 깨도 와스 다도스체나 삼다 아는 안솔 깨나 아냐게 덴들 깨슈로 와라나 디칼레 하고 슈리스 가서 안솔이 덴델라 아니 개와 두비알레 빼칼레 하고 그래서 제사데 안 디보 두비안에 지사야든 빼 디우사도 그래서 데니 인상 아니 야네 디부사 야네 디부 나선 짜야 디코라 허르되제 덴들이야 레트비아데 깔레하고 쉬어데 데니가 자야 퇴야 깔레하고 그래도 와서 데니기도 김제 삼다제도 삼다네 삼다네 제버제당 아주 제홈세 되시고 와데 제홈세 다 제바도 전에 소소가 삼다제 다 삼다네 데니 삼단 다는 가지고서 오당한테 디리 덴델레 고급 데니기 말이야 나즈 류 튕긴 차상 그런 거는 차상 튕긴 차와 은취 차상 현용은 튕긴 차 라진이 경우는 튕긴 차와도 디링에데 고급 숨제 될 양의 배제제제 셈바유에 가서 바유에 아니 밤에 와도 말 바유에 제 느끼위 냠는데 배제제제의 류에서 예주된 배출은 소야 다 세고 보면 전주 좀 올라서 봐 기회 냠는 제 잠니지 보면 요후도 배제제는 냠는지야 선배게 듬바지에 되는 우도시는 가지고 냠내 가토도 지오래서다 납정 엄마들 가지고 냠내 제 엄마들 두시 삼단 타마달라 제바 당보들도 삼단 근데 되니게 삼단에 타마들라는 되니게 냠내 제기 되니게 듬바지에 두시네 듬바지 바식자다 되는 듬바지는 소소 가토도 냠내 지오래서 단다지 숨어다 단다니 보리들이
The purpose of Shantideva teaching this verse is to help us recognize the result of not being conscientious, which is that we will continue to be dominated by the afflictions and therefore will accumulate extensive non-virtue, which can only lead in suffering and rebirth in the lower realms. Without conscientiousness, afflictions such as anger and attachment and so forth will continue to dominate our way of thinking. And through this, non-virtue is easily accumulated. And with non-virtue being so easily accumulated, how can one realistically hope for a further good rebirth, a rebirth like we've achieved now? Moreover, we need to recognize that when one falls into the lower realms, our situation is without hope. And we won't even be able to hear the words higher realms. So the meditation here continues to be a meditation of analytical meditation. And the result of this meditation should be the generation of a determination. The mind should be that arises within one should be a mind of strength and determination, and also a very positive mind, because it's a positive mind that recognizes just what we've achieved. Its great value, its rarity, but it cannot be taken for granted. It must be used well. So then this determination arises not to waste this opportunity, but rather to strive in the accumulation of virtue, strive in ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance. So a positive, determined mind is what arises from this meditation. That is the purpose of Shantideva teaching this verse.
아니네. 아지산 디가서 단다 닝보 가르 숨고도스네 아직 렘림이나 다주용을 소화한 다주 된체와 된지와 자도 숨고로와 지산 다주기 된디 류된디 되는지 지산 튠에 차상 차대와 배 된다 첨부를 된딜이야 냠는진 가르치는 치 투구리에서 지산 이게 첨부에서 냠는 지역구를 숨고로와 지산 딘하신디 지발에도 왔다 된다.
From the teachings you've received in the Lamrim, this here fits in with the teachings on recognizing the great value of this precious human rebirth.
아니네, 딘마 대니친나 점된기 예술 체량 야신기 보거 리벨 딘취 따라 미니신도 톱가르 송스.
Then Shantideva continues in the 20th verse. For that very reason, the Buddha taught that just like a turtle placing its neck into a yoke tossed about upon a vast ocean, merely becoming human is extremely difficult.
The
meaning in brief is just how very difficult it is to achieve a precious human rebirth.
Jimnendigi, the neo core that you chew and quartic to get long loss of that the niggy quartic duisine, so and Jimnendiga, and it does in the basin of some other cherry. Then the Gaso Chimbushu, Gio Gas Chimbuche, and the Gaso Chimbonalia, Yashin, Shin Pang 60 Iganji Yobache, the Gaso Dinaliores. Is that Gasugi part my Dingma Gaso Kalia or what I think. 지사데 야수들 라바게 봐. 저 발랍디가 세가 루로. 진짜 신디카지를 두고 말했어. 지금까지 갈고라지는 계속 차 계속 발랍게 봐대 잠자 예 샤샤 잠들 호셔 누저까지 갈 무슨 대로 그래지 디고레스. 이 맞춰 봐시 또 디고레지. 데네자 다 야수디 나려야 리베지고레스. 리베디 미교 말했어. 미 롱화시에스. And the making of the logic knowledge, Sarchik Kojasun, Godia Jasuchilon Madungores. So logic knowledge, Sarchik Dungores, Migio Mares. Cesada, Deji Yashing Sing Igan you Pangla, the Igan Yoruba, Jasuba, Ruby the logic knowledge, Sarchik doing to the Godiba, Igan Alachuadi, Igan Alia Zuruadi, Lelo with Yonturi Beas, Kishi.
This verse from Shantideva is referencing a sutra in which the Buddha asked or presented an analogy to his disciples, his students, and asked them a question. Imagine that on a great ocean there is floating a single wooden oxen yoke. And in this great ocean lives a turtle. And this turtle only needs to surface once a year to take a breath. But this turtle is blind. So it just surfaces wherever it happens to be when it takes its breath. Now that yoke is not tied down in one place, but floating on the ocean surface is tossed around by the wind. So with this yoke floating and tossed about on the ocean surface, this great ocean surface, and the blind turtle only surfacing once once a year, then how likely do you think it is that this turtle would place its neck through that yoke?
지데 어다디 갈래하고 시우레스면이야 렌저 어다디 데네라 때 갈래하고 레스네 이가나야 거디 이가나 기투야 때 갈래하고 레스네.
The reply from his students was, of course, just how difficult that would be. So difficult as to be near impossible.
이제 사인좀다 디갈래하고 있나? 된주기 밀류림을 쳐야 딜레 갈래하고 레스.
And the Buddha then said to his students, even more difficult, even more unlikely than the turtle placing its head through that yoke is the attainment of a precious human rebirth.
안도 나디레다 디승거래. 제자 밀류 림버체 빼 지금 밀류 림버체 단주 밀류 신도네 깔래하고 톱하고 시우레서. 제자디 디승거래. 제자 빼고네 톱가와. 아니 유고네 톱가와. 여러와 당한 제자 빼되네 삼다나 빼두네 빼 깔래하고 시우레 빼고네 톱가와 써야 돼. 밀류 림버 단주 밀류. 다 유리 진에 톱가와 써야 돼. 밀류 림버체 단주 밀류 림버 토와라 유츠림 승고거 봐다. 수림송에 깔래하고 와서 남사 제게 현재 줄용해서 예제도 수림송에 깔래하고 주고 현재 소설이야 책술람 남사파 책술랍쇼마도 세바검티야다 깔래하고 차기도 하잖아. 링아 있는 예제도 수림송에 빼 깔래하고 그래. 제가 된지 루디토에 깔래하고 그러니까 유사에 깔래하고 와서 제가 수림송에 깔래하고 그래. 안델에 진비냠는 제야리 깔래하고 되는 세바검이야는 세바검에 빼 깔래하고 와서 제자다 된주 리드는 뭐 더발라 유츠림송 아니 된주 리드는 디데라 줘 안에 진바다 쇠발라 소발 되는 전주제 몰라지만 봐 삼자규 디딩아의 고고와 제가 디가의 사야라 깔래하고 싶어서 제가 되네 깔래하고 해서 밀리토야 되신데 된주 밀리 좀 토야 돼 깔래하고 해서 내가 남림 날에 뒤순 거로 봐다.
There are two reasons presented why that a precious human rebirth is so difficult to attain. The one is that presented through an illustration such as this. And the second is that of how difficult it is to accumulate the requisite causes. And the cause for a human rebirth or a rebirth in the high realms is that of ethics. And ethical restraint is difficult. For example, if someone just looks at us askance, we may well take offense and say something. Or if someone says something unkind towards us, we're very likely to take offense and respond in kind. So there we see from our own lived experience how difficult it is to be ethical, how easy it is to create the causes that are contrary to ethics. Likewise, through the same illustration, patience is difficult. So too is sincere generosity, sincerely giving of oneself. As too is that of joyous perseverance. So the cultivation of the causes that lead to excellent rebirths, these are difficult. Hence, it is so difficult to achieve a precious human rebirth. So there again are these two ways that a precious human rebirth is difficult to be attained. It's shown through these two ways. The one is an illustration, an example such as this, and the other is how difficult it is to cultivate the requisite causes.
제가 지금 대니션나 좀된디 제서 치르야 녀신기 무거 루비 딘취 따라 세대 제가 디베디듯이 주바래 제가 대니션나 세대랑 대니션나세 강을리 디스모 제가 당어서 체델이야 덴딜레 아니지 셈 바위에 덴제 Geshe Madruba, and same Bami on the town, Dibajaya, Sabaina, Chizang Solid Tarshi, Geshe, and Dendri Kale Caboredo was, Jumsin Dineza, Nangazulia, or Tuku waters, the Madruba, Benjum Digi, Sunras, and the Jum Digi, Jaso, Jas Chembo Dinalia, and Yashing Jigyobache, and Bua, Igan Jigyobache, and deep Jaso Party, Katse, Galokora Kabla, Rube, the Milonwachi. 미균의 거 가와이 따지네한테 거기도 여러와데 저 미롱아 라게 되지고 저 미통에 매와서다 되네 로직라 살지 된디 거기 봐 이가나를 취해야지 갈래가 버려서 진짜 따라서 아니 갈래가 버 디나신 딜레자 갈래가와 민이신도 토바가스 제상한테 밀리로시 토야 단지 밀리로시 톱사디 마시 갈래가 버려서 딜레자 갈래가와레스 가로 송신의 사기에 된 송요래지
The illustration quoted by Shantideva is very clear, where he states that just like a turtle swimming, a blind turtle swimming in a great ocean that only surfaces every year, that turtle is incredibly unlikely to place its head through a yoke floating on this vast ocean. And even more unlikely than that is the attainment of a precious human rebirth. And so the meaning behind this illustration in our context is to recognize how important it is to be conscientious. Because if one is not conscientious, if one lacks conscientiousness, then one is going to be like this turtle, struggling to attain a good rebirth again.
두 진에 삼내 안에 야도 땅에도 갑라 디문에 라 레도 셈베게 셈 딩리아 네버니에게 지금 용고로 받아 되는 어때 디네 레도 와서 별로면도 어디 한다다 디링데 개와지 맞은데 디미노 셈베게다 디기 내수디 세부 중원에다 하고 요도 다디 용원에 제거디 돈이 dimba ko rangshu ki phaji ligin sarwade nganzu ki del samna jira mata de del ya pe denigi jige muye ni su de ta de ya ko ha mo de sir ha ko na niba yama shu go marwa shu me de an del ya de ke dibong geru nyamne chege 돈이 dimba di ko ya jira ko ki tu go mare jisa de za du jina samda jeba ji du jeba ji 다 디링다 고급 디디션을 빼사사래 삼배 삼로직 두신에 레어디 겁라 다 디링딩 아니면 제호도 선비게다 돈이 듬바디 봐 두스전에 용구 있어라 내내 돈이 듬바 가지 숙체에 번에 는 개비 잡아들이야 좀 배지지고로 와다 다 디스 차상 당원주기 두신에 삼다다서 삼는 두스당에 토네 안줄야 제대야 아다 직도나 전부 디냠는 맞은 지금이 선비게 냠는 제도게 돈이 듬바게 돼 송걸 받아 돈이 듬바게 해서나 듬바 숙지 뭐였나 나중에 변 들어와도 변에 차와 가져나 소속이 진님의 걸 때문에 제 돈이 신보다 차와 가져나 제투고를 차와 가져나 잡나 차와 나나 제투고 강아 가져나 제투고를 받았어 돈이 듬바 숙지 뭐였나 돈이 듬바 면에 되는 인남시키 왜는 아니가 요구도 지금에서 되기로 받아 들어와 띵아서 디스 세우시 하고 야로 받아 찾아
The purpose of this verse and this section of verses is to challenge our habitual way of thinking, to really shake us awake. The accumulation of virtue, this refers to what one is doing with one's mind. It refers to our very way of thinking. So this needs to be recognized. And we need to recognize, as is presented in this illustration, or in this verse, just how fortunate we are that this opportunity we have is not commonplace. We should not expect to attain it again. We should value what we have. So these verses that Shantideva is presenting, he's presenting them so as to shake us to recognize these truths which we all have already long understood and accepted, but we haven't realized them. We haven't realized, and the way we recognize that this is merely understood and not realized is that our behavior hasn't changed. When through reflecting on these points again and again, we transform our understanding into realization. This is then when what we value, where we put our time and our energy and our mental focus, this will change. So right now, the reason that our endeavors to accumulate virtue are so weak, that our distraction to applying ourselves to the mind of the Dharma, why our distraction is so strong, is because we haven't yet realized these foundational trainings. So the purpose of this and of this section is to help us develop a deep determination, a yearning, a zeal for applying ourselves to what has value. So here we can take the analogy of great sports people, those who want to become the very best in their chosen field, who want to become an outstanding athlete that stands out in the world, that's perhaps one of the very best in the world. They will train precisely as their coaches guide them, and they'll do so with zealousness, with a deep determination. Things like unpleasant weather or something on television, this is not going to distract them from their training. That will be their dominant preoccupation. And when doing so, it won't be a mere activity, but it'll be something they're engaging in with deep focus. So this is an analogy from our world that is we should strive to cultivate within, in terms of our determination to have a mind deeply engaged in the Dharma, no matter what varying activities we need to engage in.
Nusine da nganjigi da nyamlin je komja se da usine jik dus de je na de dusine je sam da jik nganjigi sem bae meten ba je ba me on da di we din din sa gu do din sa na di gu sa ge di de nga so ki du da nga so te le din du nga di ge yin gu sa go re se da ge wa di du na an din re ge le gu din sa go da di nga so sa gu de sa mi o da di din ma sa ban de pe sa se sam da ne do something didn't want to do it. I think you are using your nature. She had a new bitch. I was out in the Jigmia, some time. So she will know Jiggy of a Shelia. Come to Pember do a Jigia, some bit dinner sometime. Then energy and the Jig, Servo Community, Ya, Jangi, Tawata, Karachevene, and so you park Kondo Malachi, Kondo Malamachi, Servachi, Kondo Malamachi, Dushin Chit to a Jiggy and big something. I think Yamlenchi, I think, Massadini, Koi, Yapuri, Mudishi Jigin Sempe sometime. And the Mawbane didn't see to shows and begin Molam Kia. And the inside so running and Ajin, that is Pakashes dinner something. Round Ajin, she has some Tamjela, Kozuki Digi to go some Tamje Digi the temper show some sometime. Dushin some died, the one you damage. Dushin some of the Yana and the Yana died. Then some of the Kipa, she nibble must on a church, the nibble church reward, what that. The niggy sometime, the Nism Tamji. Digi to the Dumasia and Nichi and some of that. In this Tamji doing a San Yoko Toba chicken sometime. I asked him to do San Yoko Toba chicken some dance out to Jella, the young and the Toya Dundalangi, Lunais going to use you to be soon some of that. The nigger, that you launch Chimpata sometime. Dushin some died, is it? Dushin some douche in the Yane and the Tavan, and the Sarchi, Tiny Yane Yado, down and some Korea de Lela. And the niggy and the chicken, Lamsan, 2 at Yungu, Tanganzo de Namindi, Gomshi, Chick Major, and the chicks, Calaho child or Jalia. Is a douche and some tanquade, the nigger some Jango, said that Lupsen did Tisungoro that.
To be then specific in how to engage in the meditation is first reflect on the faults of lacking conscientiousness and thereafter the benefits of relying on conscientiousness. So first, recollecting the faults of lacking conscientiousness, be aware that when I'm not conscientious, the afflictions will habitually arise as I know that they do. But even when I recognize them, lacking conscientiousness, I will follow them, and I will make excuses to follow them. I'll see them as acceptable. So in these ways, I'll be creating non-virtue, which is the causes for suffering and rebirth in the lower realms. Whereas on the other hand, if I rely on conscientiousness, then I'll keep the afflictions at bay, and minds of virtue will be easy to cultivate, such as ethics, generosity, patience, and joyous perseverance. And these are the causes for happiness. They will lead to my mind being more peaceful. And I'll be creating the causes for rebirth in the higher realms. And I'll be creating the causes that will enable my ongoing spiritual development for lifetimes to come. So if you have a greater aspirations for, say, calm abiding or bodhicitta or the wisdom realizing emptiness, all of those become possible by relying on conscientiousness and cultivating the foundational trainings of ethics and so forth. So those are the first two steps, thinking of the faults of lacking conscientiousness and the benefits of relying on conscientiousness. Then one can meditate on ethics and so forth. And in this meditation, in these points, one meditates on the benefits of these various minds, but also role plays situations. For example, imagines, in particular, real situations one has been in or expects to be in again, and recognize how one needs to respond ethically, how one can be patient in that circumstance or be generous. And in this way, you make the virtuous meditation topic very real to your lived experience, recognizing how you have been ethical in a challenging circumstance, for example, and committing to being so again. Then one can make prayers for inspiration to the Buddhas and your teachers, inspirational blessings, so that one continues in this training. So meditation such as this is quite straightforward, but it's imperative that one does so again and again. So right now, together, your mind has been following what's being said, so one's engaging in this meditation. But one needs to do so again and again, so you become habituated to it. Then, one will be able to engage in the meditation very quickly. Now it will take more time. But when you habituate it, it will become very quickly that it will arise within you. And then you're ready to start adding other topics. For example, one can meditate on the sufferings of samsara, use it as an impetus to develop love and compassion, use that to develop bodhicitta and so forth. But these are the foundational trainings to give one the strength of mind to let go of distraction and to focus on what is truly valuable.
Andu sinanga samda nyamne jese dine za tanga je ta susu rang rang samda bine ta jige garchigu se samda nga ju kalhan samro jigor bada ka je anju jinane nga ju ge tunda re ya nga ju de cheshe che da nye she nga ju ka blia samlo nga chaza samlo shi dang gor bada dine re do asme samlo shi dang gor che baro samtu somtu jigor di membe ge da nga ju ge namyin nga za da jing ime ta baro ji gewejawa manual maso eto so jigor bada sesa dine za gyune nga ju ge tenju ludin delia kyawa gyune masawa de regulment bada sesa dine za nga ju kala ngam sa gor ba sesa kyawa sa di kabla dikpa di phag pongor ba ka gor ba ja ja sesa sa gor dine samda susugi samda otang dine de je pe ya bor esem bi sosugi ya kawa komya da sosu pobo kyoga de nge chima chagore sesa da dus chen samda da nga ju de 야직 파 소수기 제어디 안에 셴다 지당기 미래 되니게 땅아주 코리오네 샘젠디게 삼다 오다 콘소젠다 샘젠디게 네다직 예외 잠기네 신고 말하게 기네 고플라게다 콘소잠다 앞에 하고 고합 야고 여바 될야 갈간sam로 집에시 당기에서 배송다도 소설 배 하고 주셔다디 이 무디시디 드누디 야게 땅에서 배 나삼로 두스지는 가지고 소소라니 개와 가르가르 지혜메데 삼다 이 제버들이야 안 지수이라 빼야고 중셔도 지수이라자다 이 디네제 빼야고 소소 뽑기야자 안드는 나디야 무디쟁이 디딜레 야겠다 무디치기 선배 삼다디 아주 계지 못하고
To talk briefly a little further on meditation itself. Meditation is a process by which one comes to know oneself better. So one needs to be honest with oneself and approach this in this process of self-discovery in a balanced way. So one needs to, when sitting quietly, reflect on how the day has been and come just to see, in general, how was my mind. And the truth is, we'll all be the same, to varying degrees, but our mind will have been largely distracted, and sometimes it would have been dominated by the afflictions, and other times we would have actually been trying to reduce the afflictions, maybe even trying to cultivate virtue. So this will be the case for all of us. How much of the day we spend in distraction, how much we spend on accumulating virtue, there will be some variety. So we need to recognize this for ourselves and come to see where we are, and where we recognize that we tried to cultivate virtue, we try to do the right thing and be ethical or be generous and so forth, rejoice in that. And at the times when we were just mindless and we can't really recall too much of our mental process at the time, then commit to trying and being more mindful and ensuring that the mind is virtuous. And where we recall times where we were afflicted, maybe we got a little frustrated or annoyed, or we followed our desires, then recognize that and rely on some antidotes, and thereby commit to trying to reduce that propensity. The approach to take with yourself is one of honesty, but also gentleness. Accepting where we are, and wherever we are, that is fine. We accept that. But we also recognize we can be much more virtuous. We can strengthen our habituation to virtue, but building new habituations takes time. So that's okay too. But the essential component is that I will repeatedly engage. I will continue again and again. I won't give up. I won't just do it sporadically. I will continuously try to take care of my mind. And when I forget, or when it doesn't go so well and I get, say, annoyed or follow desire, it's okay. I've got a long way to go, but I'll continue to try. Then lastly, a key component in this, in addition to taking a balanced and realistic approach, is to ensure that you take a positive approach, in the sense of where you see good, rejoice in that. Where you, and in particular, that you are trying to do this, even though it is difficult. It's difficult to change deep-seated habituations over lifetimes. Rejoice in your endeavors. Rejoice in your endeavors, no matter the level of success. Rejoice in your endeavors. This is imperative, because a mind that is joyous is a mind that will want to continue, will want to persevere, and will not be so easily distracted and drawn to being mindless. So in this way, be honest with yourself, but in a balanced way, and be intentionally joyous.
Denege samdhaide doshe jesan dushina nganzo denege dushina samdhavine jesan sosoli konro sayaro da karesli gore sebige samdhade bene jan soso ranrangi dawatida debada dawada mitunbaji jandagi sosoli lava da denege chevene lamsa sosoge dawada mitunbaji leodu samlo dida mitunbaji kenzawido samlo dida mitunbaji jandagi 직시에 어디 qabla 고용도 람사 소소기 따와디 미팅바디기 삼로디 미팅바지 차라도 딜바 송교로 마선데 콘로사이드 송교로 시도 소소 따와디 미팅발레디 디 송교부터 날야 람사 콩로지 예나 파기시 가르쳐 남산 탁탁탁탁 제해서 젠투도 어디 디니시하고 디시하고 세상 젠투에 돼 디존한테 남산 젠투에 가서 냐마네 그 곰시 먹고를 봐도 양내 양도 되네 제가 곰시 되네 다 삼르셔 다 먹어서 수수 따와 미팅 내려도 남산 될야 아니 이제 셈톤에 디디디디 제오 디디시하고 선배 삼르 남산 콜투게 돼 콜도 아니 기시고는 나하고 파직 탁탁다 시에다 류게 넘주더네 가르된 건 찾았던 뒤에 그 소식에 따와도 미팅 받으려도 디송교기 된다야 아니 지금 그 콘트랙이 삼을 다마를 딜라고 돼 삼을 다마를 콜용 콜 남산 콜 유튜브하지 콜 투브네 남산 콜용도 삼을 콜용도 디기 이제 류하게 잡아도 남산 탁탁탁 해야지 이 완전 검시시고 여봐자 남산 지 삼다 먹어 남산 레투에 차기도 하디 이 검시시고 예외긴이 차거로 와다
When reflecting back on your day, and you saw and you see a time when you got angry, or if not angry, frustrated or annoyed, then pause with that and ask yourself, why did I get angry? Why did I get annoyed? And in many cases, you'll recognize something did not go in accordance with your wishes, or someone said or did something not in accordance with your views or your opinions. That's all. And merely from that, anger arose in your mind. Maybe you spoke in a harsh way. Maybe you acted even in an angry way. Recognize that process. And recognize now that you're looking at it from a point of distance. Your mind now is calm. Recognize, on the one hand, how silly it is that just because something was contrary to your wishes or your views or your opinions, that this whole emotional response arose. So recognize that. Recognizing it as being silly helps keep the mind a little light in this situation. Moreover, recognize that this response is solely an habituation. Something goes against my wishes, this response follows. It's just a deep-seated habit. That is all. And that habit then is expressed physically or verbally. So recognizing it as a deep-seated habituation is important because it gives one the courage to continue, because habits can be broken, as we know. New habits can be developed too. And also approach it with lightness, of seeing it merely as an habituation, not as something worthy of self-criticism. It's just a habit, nothing more.
lai samlo khor tuya da she tuya di ko komshi ra di ji lamsa sam ta mo le tuya cha gi do ta yang nga du sense ji sam da de mi shan da ji nga zu ya so su le pen ba ju pen do ro je bei na ya bu le tu she什么的你chung chung ma do da ko nga le pan do che so ni ko le ya ro ko kan de xi go pan do kan de ji wo zum sam lo di ji nga ga de xi de pan do go ko ga de xi pan ji ga de 판도 제거에게 답을 가르가르 두스면 남상 남sam도 코르투 고문도 와 지난 디마호 완자 안데 릉하게 전에 자와디 펜비 자와 지투요 말와 디마호와디 소소 펜바데 소소 펜바지 제바데 펜바 징하레 패션 코로버 제선 셈비게 삼로치 용고를 때 이나 델야 팔이야 직 소소리야 야고 제베 델야 파이 이 렌디 야고 제디 디제고도 삼로도 코르투 고문도 와 술련녀와 제 마고 제 소설에 녀버지 녀버 디지고 남성 코르투도 아디 검시 슈치버 슈여 봐라. 자 술이야 야고지 펜버도네 띵알에 판도 주소 디고 판 델량 해파 파카 판도 간다 주간 지고 삼로 등이네 니티페 야고라 삼다야네 양도 삼다지 제고 삼베 삼로린 마도 남상 디리토입니다. 디레 모두 등한으로 검시 매와 봐라. 그래서 디 매와자 디레토고 말. 근데 니네 자 두스는 삼다야 야네 야도 pen semje 탐지를 대화대 되나 semje 동아도 자나서 야네야도 곰고를 세디로와다 니네 야네야도 곰요도 아니 직 람사 어떻게 된 첨부를 파견이 되고 된거를 깨지사고 바로 붙여버려서 삼로대 양 Rashi ko ngat namjin khong la mi chi la de pha lam san len je ba na shi ta ta le tu go jan shi ba de ge de le tu go ro ho so gom shi gom bi gen ji da je san nga zo le pe ka le ha go shu re de yo je san di ko ka se de gom shi shu me bi gen cha go ro da je san di nga zo le da de ne yin sa sem jan tham ji jin che bo yi ba ya ne ya do sam tang go re sem jan ha ji ran le jin che bo ya ne do sam ta sem jan tham ji de ba de dem ba shu sam be sam do ya ne ya do tang sem jan du na jan shu sam be sem ji ya ne ya do sam ta sem jan tham ji le pan do de nge ji ge sem be sam do tang go gom go re se de du se ya ne ya tang yo de an ko lam sa den tu ya da ko tu ya de li se ro ji de ne za de gom go re jang go re se de lo jang go re lo jang lo jong se de ro da ga ji nyam len je so sam ta de de do an 당 차사 직발에다 개발 요마 당 차사 직발에
This process or this technique of taking actual lived examples from your own life, from your own day, this really is very important, very effective, because then the meditation is real and very relevant to you. So to take another illustration is if you help someone, and whether you're helping them because that is your role in that situation, or whether you go out of your way to help someone you recognize is in need, and they, in response, they show no gratitude. Or maybe you help them many times and they just take your help for granted. When you recognize that your response to that, which is likely to be quite negative towards that individual, then sit back and look at how your mind was then. And like with the previous illustration, just ask yourself, why did I respond in that way? So you may not have said anything, you may not have done anything any differently, but this pushback, this aversion towards the other person arose within. You ask yourself, why did that happen? And you recognize again that there's an habituation here. And that's all it is. And habituations can be let go of. So this habituation comes from our culture, that we learn that when someone shows us kindness or someone helps us, that we should thank them and that we should smile and that we should say that we appreciate the help and so forth. And when someone doesn't do that, then we've learned from our culture that it's very rude and that they're looking down on us and so forth. So because we've learned this way of thinking, again, through our observation, as well as perhaps we are told directly, this is habitual response. That's all it is. That's all it is. So by recognizing that this is just a way of thinking, we can then take courage that this way of thinking, one, it doesn't define us. If it's something we dislike about ourselves, we can recognize it does not define us. We also recognize that this way of thinking, it's harmful and we need to get rid of it because it closes our heart to others. We may well have the response of, I won't help that person again. But being an habituation, we know we can do something about it. And from our teachings, we know we need to rather reflect on that this person, in whatever way they responded, it came from a motivation of wanting to be happy, of not wanting to suffer. So if they thank me with sincerity, if they thank me with insincerity, if they didn't thank me at all three of those responses came from the same place. They want to be happy. And they have as much right as my dearest loved one, as myself, to happiness. May they be happy. May they be happy. And then we use this way of thinking to lead us towards the training, the further meditations on bodhicitta. And this immediately, when we're sitting quietly in our room, reflecting on the day, will help us to let go of any of the residual negativity towards that individual that we otherwise would have carried. We do this again and again, we will see our habituation slowly over time. It will change. We won't respond in the same way anymore, or certainly not as often, not as easily. So this is the process of mind training, and it's something that all of us need to do. This is part of how I live my life, how I meditate, and I encourage you to do the same. This is how we cultivate the Dharma within.
내내 먼저 장질에 단념는 제시에디 심바유된 시에디 먼저 심데 개위 초장장도 봐 삼다제 저 심삼다에 개위 장에 개위 초장야 삼다에 삼다에 바유된 봐죠. 밤에 발라도 일단 녀모be 초장도 밤에 봐차로 그러와 지산제 바유된 고래스도 심디 개위 삼장야 땅 고래서 지서 송고로 진짜 집에는 가지고 심자 탐제 대화의 덴발 대심자 탐제 디기의 덴발 쇼 섬도 안에 직접만 많이 받여서 심지어야 동아 중나 섬도 섬도 남의 기기면서로다 미기면여와 심지어의 동아지 중나 섬바 심지어 대화의 대나 섬배 대화 덴발 쇼 대화의 고고도 섬배 섬자야 땅어도 데니기 간섬질에 심지어의 동아 요나 섬배 섬도 되네 게임에 자고로와 지난 안솔라디 지경으로 하다 제나 아데리 강알체나 디서 선사용으로 하다 또 독자를 디샤 선배 강알체 코디샤 선배 섬리로 제 선발 딜리고마 아데 데네 미넬리고마 가서 검시 심젤레 잠니 주고 검시 빼 죽지 못 차원자 데니게 섬리고 안즈디 젤야 지게 데니게 섬도 죽지 메디 딜리고로 봐 데네 땅한테 돈달라 양안 주게 냠렌제 세르 셈바유 된 개위 초도 땅 냠렌 조제네 심녀모버 초소 마땅하지 참세네 셈이 참세의 선참세 개위다 개와다 녀모베게 참디 셈디 아주 그래서 녀모베 사실 파마다지 개위 나로 사장야 되면은 참래다 셈이 참을 리드가 와도 나지고는 아주 공부하지 바자나 가 참여로는 셈데 개위 섬마다지 멘지 샬야 되니게 셈마다면 셈데 개위 섬 바에 개위 섬 야야 다वे나 아니 셈참 셈이 참 리드 바서 셈참 차고로 와 참원에 가서 참세도 개위 참내 대해지네 녀모가 쳐서 마다서로 와다 산참 마서 디스고로 와 다양 디로다네 셈데 베직 다지 잘라디 녀고도 총한테 마오바디죠 당하디 드린 삼 두고 사데 되네간서 두스네 되베나 베네 수제메 구조지 남 되베나 지 삼로디 마오빌레가디 제고 삼삼다네 즈리 저서 참 수제 마통서 남 되고데 삼로디 사상 지고 산삼 예제 로디고 산삼나 현다나 지디어서 최고로 저서 디네 자다 안저 두些其实保育电国里是全球前面哪里啊的地方是保育流程其实先保育电国是保育电它流的保育电是先鸟毛被确实马当的给予出了讲讲三当国里是的那个三大节给我主国里是送过来的那应不当的
And to speak a little further about the mind of conscientiousness. So conscientiousness is a virtuous mental factor, it's a virtuous mind that serves the function of keeping our minds within the realms of virtue. Its opposite, non-conscientiousness, is on the side of the afflictions. When one is non-conscientious or lacks conscientiousness, then one's mind will be on the side of the afflictions. So when we develop habituation to a virtuous way of thinking. For example, may all sentient beings abide in happiness. And we become habituated to it, so it becomes a mind that's uncontrived for us. Then the wish for others to suffer will never arise, no matter what they have done to us or what we have observed. We'll never want harm for them to come. And where we are now as ordinary beings is very far from that. There's in our society there's this habit that we have also learned of liking or even wanting or believing in just retribution, and we will see that this person has got their just desserts for for what they said or what they did. A bodhisattva will never respond in such a manner, no matter what is done to them or what they observe. They won't want anyone to suffer or see it as a worthy response or something that someone deserved, even if they created those causes. And a further way to understand conscientiousness is as it is acts as a boundary between our mind being virtuous and non-virtuous. And this is a boundary within which we should ensure we reside wherever we go, whatever we are doing. This boundary, boundary forming mind of conscientiousness, being a consciousness, is not something that we only need to generate at formal times such as this or doing our practice at home, but at all times we should live within the constraints, within the boundaries of conscientiousness. So this word boundary is also the word for retreat. So when one engages in retreat or in a single meditation session, one places one's body and one's mind within boundaries. So the boundary of conscientiousness that we should live at all times within is to ensure that our mind is staying virtuous. And moreover, in particular, when one is engaging in meditation, it's not sufficient merely to have the mind virtuous, but the mind should be on the virtuous topic that one is reflecting on, as opposed to being distracted to other virtuous topics. And moreover, where we see conscientiousness not fulfilling its role is when one is supposedly meditating, but one's mind is on activities to be done or past events. When we rely on conscientiousness, our mind is within the confines of virtue, in particular, the virtuous object we are trying to cultivate.
이디나 냠내 제야던 고갑되는 대지구대 하나 디체도 배 야구 인생 비소서 가와 공부하다 제소소소서 제수 일하지야 안다는 무뒤쟁이 냠내 지긴심 뽑아 기어야 디지네 ndanalang 저기 대슈바나지다 디링이 대 상포텔 톱티베 고갑 여바텔이야 나셈 바이 텐제 안 냠내 야구 제고래 세바 수마나진 소소의 강토도도 시긴 셈베당 도시네 삼나다 제바제 삼다는 삼다위 토네 안델이야 제리기 돈이 듬바기야 돼저 듬바기야 되래 듬바기야 되네 소소교 무슨 알린다 가제 지투투 강투도 제도다 되네시.
So our mind, in terms of our aspiration, our determination, is still very weak. So if sitting here, the determination, the aspiration arises within you, this is the aspiration to engage in these meditations, to try and apply yourself to the minds of virtue at all times. This is excellent, and continue to generate it. But also accept where you are, that our mind is still weak, our aspiration is weak. So therefore, we need to keep regenerating it with the understanding it will fade away. And that's okay, because that is where we are. But what we should not do is then let it go, but rather, when we notice, regenerate our determination. When you see the afflictions, not to follow them. When you sit quietly and look back at your day and you see that you've done well, rejoice. This helps to develop your determination. And if you engage in the meditations as described tonight, rejoice in the mere fact every time you do so. Because this process of repetition is indispensable to develop new habits and break old habits. and generating joy in the mind. This makes it much easier to engage in something again and again. And as one does so, and one feels some change, then that aspiration, that determination, that will grow. And it becomes then ever easier to engage in these meditations. So then thank you. We can conclude there for tonight, but if you have some questions, then feel free to ask. Then thank you very much. Thank you very much.